Well, thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Chris McGrath. I'm the founder of Tangowork, and Tangowork provides chatbot software and chatbot consulting, especially for HR, intranets, and internal communications. Prior to Tangowork, I co-founded Thought Farmer. It's intranet software that's used by a few hundred organizations around the world. During this webinar, I'll be joined by Brian Edwards from Habanero Consulting Group, and he's going to show you an HR chatbot that he has. So we're looking forward to that. Brian, say hello.
Yep. Hi, Chris. Thanks. Hopefully everyone can hear me. It's good. Thanks for inviting me along.
Yeah, great to have you here today. If we look at the screen here, this is a picture of an Amazon Echo device. And Brian, you were telling me that you use Alexa in your home, isn't that right?
Yeah, I do. We're a big fan. I had no idea that all these little tiny pieces of my life would be taken over at home by my Alexa conversations. It's pretty remarkable. It's also, unfortunately, a big favorite of my 4.5-year-old child who likes to ask her to fart and tell jokes all the time. But we're working out the norms around that in the household.
Apparently, there's over 50 million Amazon devices out there. Well, that was earlier this year, and they expected 50 million to be sold this year. And people are using voice bots at home to do everything, right? To get the latest news, to get weather reports, to, as Brian said, ask it to make a fart noise, to turn on music. So voice bots are being used really heavily. That's the reality right now. In the workplace, though, we're a little bit behind the consumer side, as we tend to be. But businesses are adopting chatbots for internal use, and it's growing exponentially. Here's a quote by Gardner. By 2021, they expect that more than 50% of enterprises will spend more per annum on bots and chatbot creation than on traditional mobile app development, and that chatbots will become the face of AI, which kind of makes sense, doesn't it? And although we're only seeing kind of that we're at the beginning of this curve, I love this quote from Bill Gates. It says, "We always overestimate the change that will occur in the next 2 years and underestimate the change that will occur in the next 10. So don't let yourself be lulled into inaction." So I think this has always proved true. Chatbots are just starting right now, but in a few years, we will all be using them at work to do things like ask for a phone number or get the status of a ticket or find the link to a system or ask what our revenue was last quarter or find out what's on the cafeteria menu. If it can be expressed in words, we'll be using a chatbot to get it done. Now, just to back up here a little bit and talk about what is a chatbot, and for simplicity, we're going to include voice bots as a type of chatbot. A chatbot is a software program that runs inside your messaging app. So just like you message people with a chatbot, you're messaging a piece of software. And instead of a person responding, it's the computer that responds. And the technology between a voice bot and a chat bot, a text bot, is really identical. It's the same core. With a voice bot, there's just an extra level that takes the voice and turns it into text. And when it's responding back to you, it takes text and turns it to voice. But at the core, it's the same. Now, at Tangowork, we're currently focused more on text-based chatbots because we think they have broader applicability in the digital workplace. Although we're comfortable talking to Alexa in our home, we just don't think we're there yet where people are comfortable talking to their computers, especially in the world of open plan offices that we live on. Maybe that will change. And chatbots can be delivered in all these different channels you see across the bottom, right? You can use a chatbot in SMS. You can use one in Facebook Messenger or their workplace product, WorkChat. Or you can use it in Slack, Skype. Microsoft Teams is one that's really exploding right now. And we also see a lot of use of chatbots just embedded in another website or embedded in an intranet, and that's another way they can be developed. Now, here's a quick example of the Tangowork chatbot just running on Facebook Messenger. So if you click Get Started, it gives you a little welcome message that says, "Hey, I can answer questions about Tangowork." and here's some suggestions of things you can try. So you just say hi, and the chatbot gives a random answer back, a random greeting. Nice day out, isn't it? You can ask a product-related question. Does Tangowork work on SMS? And it answers that. It says SMS. Tangowork works fine with plain SMS messaging. On the downside, SMS has to be short and plain text. And then you can say, who works for you? And it comes back with a listing of people who work at Tangowork. And so that's a quick example that you can access on Facebook Messenger. Just search for Tangowork. So throughout this webinar, you're free to ask questions, and we'll be addressing them definitely at the end. And if it makes sense to address your questions in the middle of the webinar, we'll do that too. But let's look at a few scenarios when you should consider a chatbot for HR. So first of all, if you want to provide fast answers to employee questions, you can't do better than a chatbot. It's faster and easier to be using your existing chat app than to have to open a separate web application to log on, to navigate. If you have a question and you want your employees to be able to get fast answers to those, chatbots are great. So here's a chatbot we built for Bupa. Bupa is a global healthcare company based in the UK. They have 80,000 employees. And this is Bupa, just we're saying, hi Cyan. Cyan is their brand color, so that's what they've called it. And they ask, what's the nearest tube station? This is for their global headquarters at Angel Court in London. And so it gives a suggestion on the nearest tube station. Ask, what's the guest Wi-Fi password? So this chatbot they can use to ask HR type questions like, how do I book time off? Where's the travel policy? What's the link for payroll? And it gives them instant answers to all those different questions. Another scenario where you'd want to consider a chatbot is if your organization already uses messaging heavily. So many organizations have a standard messaging app, especially knowledge-based organizations, and that's already open on everybody's desktop. So for you, it might be Skype for Business, it might be Teams, it might be Slack, it might be Jabber. So if that's your scenario, that's a big reason to consider chatbots, right? Because employees then don't need to context switch. They don't need to go from their messaging app and then boot up a web app. Instead, they can do it in this environment that they're already used to. This is especially true for organizations that have adopted Slack. They find that Slack starts to become the center of their universe. And as organizations adopt Microsoft Teams, they're also finding this to be true. The Teams becomes the center of their universe. Here's in Bupa, the example that I just talked about. Skype for Business is installed on every single person's desktop, and they can't make or receive a phone call without using Skype for Business. So they have to use their computer headset, and that's how they make and receive phone calls. And so if you're in that scenario, you've always got Skype for Business open, so of course it makes sense to have a Skype for Business chatbot. So if that's your scenario, if you're already relying on messaging heavily, it's a strong reason for you to consider a chatbot for your HR needs. A third scenario is if your employees have slow or unstable internet. That's probably not the case if you have a bunch of knowledge workers at a corporate headquarters. But for some companies that have field workers in rural areas, and they're going in and out of internet service, chatbots are great because they require very little bandwidth for those text messages. Plus, you can also use them with SMS, and SMS works on 4.5 billion mobile phones worldwide, so you don't even need internet. The chatbots use so little bandwidth that Delta has been able to offer free messaging on all their flights. And the reason they can make it free is because it just takes this little tiny sliver of the bandwidths of the plane's bandwidth. Of course, they can't offer free Netflix, which is what many people would prefer. But messaging they can, because it uses very little data. Another scenario to consider a chatbot is when your HR data is spread across multiple systems. Now, Brian from Habanero is going to show us a neat example of this. But you likely have dozens of systems at your company, maybe several even for HR. A chatbot can go out to the appropriate system and either pull data for you or manipulate data for you, all from one interface. So as a quick example, this chatbot is saying, what can I help you with today? And the user asks for the status of a ticket. And for that status, it goes out to Jira and says, here's what I found in Jira. The ticket was about posting a job listing to the website, and the status is resolved. So the user asks, do you have Tammy McTavish's phone number? It comes back and says, yeah, here it is. So it pulled that likely from Outlook or Microsoft Exchange. The user asks, how many vacation days do I have left? It comes back and says, in 2018, you've taken 11 days of vacation. You have 4 days left. So for that, it might need to go to a system such as Workday. You will likely have this scenario, and that's one of the beautiful things about a chatbot, is that it can go out to the appropriate system and pull that data in for you. And in about 10 minutes or so, we'll look at a demo of that by Habanero. By the way, we're streaming this live on Facebook, so if anybody's joining us from Facebook, hello, welcome. Glad you're able to join. So a fifth scenario to consider an HR chatbot is if you need a better way to reach employees than broadcast email. And many people get excited about push notifications as a way to reach employees because they just aren't getting any reaction to the emails they send out. Push notifications on mobile devices are great, but you have to get your employees to install an app. And many organizations are adopting some sort of employee app, which can be useful. And then it enables push notifications. But with chatbots, you don't have to install any employee app because it just works on the underlying messaging app like Teams or Slack or Facebook Work Chat. People don't install apps. The average person installed 0 apps last month. This is a stat that's always reported to by, I think it's ComScore. So in the past month, last time I got stats for it, 51% of people had installed 0 apps. Just under half had installed 1+ apps. But the point is that you don't need to install an app with chatbots, and chatbots give you broadcasting capability. So a broadcast is like this. It comes to your phone, closures due to flooding. You go into the chatbot, it says, hey, due to severe flooding, 4 of our branches in the southern interior are closed today. We'll send more updates as soon as more information becomes available. So that's an example of a broadcast. Or here's one we were working on for a clothing chain. You see my phone here, and it says week 3 news about t-shirts. So you swipe to open that. I use my Touch ID. And there's the full news article about these new tees that are available, and I can enter a number to get information about the specific t-shirt. So that's a broadcast. If broadcasts or push notifications are useful to you, if that would help you better communicate with your employees, then you should consider chatbots. A sixth scenario where chatbots are useful is if your employees work in scenarios where their hands aren't available. So for example, they're operating machinery or helping a patient in a healthcare situation, or they're in a lab, then you can consider voice bots. Voice bots have huge potential in healthcare and also in labs or in industrial settings. If you've ever tried to use any of your HR systems without hands, probably doesn't work, right? Most of our software requires our hands, but chatbots make this whole voice thing an option, which is exciting. Again, throughout this webinar, if you have any questions, type them into the Q&A and we'll consider them at the end of the webinar. So finally, consider chatbots if you think your existing HR systems are too hard to use. We're working with an organization right now who's deployed Workday. Many big companies are deploying Workday. And what they found is that as soon as they deployed Workday, they saw a huge increase in the inbound calls to their internal operations center, having to field calls from people. And that's not unusual. When you adopt a piece of complicated enterprise software, you increase the burden on your internal call center. And so companies are looking to chatbots to answer some of those questions that employees have before passing them on to real people, which are obviously expensive. But we tend to overestimate people's computer skills. We're in Canada here. I'm in the interior of British Columbia, and Brian is in Vancouver. So it's 8 in the morning. It's early for us, but we got up just for you for this webinar. We tend to overestimate people's computer skills. This was a study of 216,000 users, so a very comprehensive study, and it was reported on by Nielsen Norman Group just over a year ago. And what they found is that just 6 or 7% in most developed countries have people with strong computer skills. You can see here about 2/3 of people have poor, terrible, or can't use computers at all skills, and then a group of people in the medium area. But what I found really interesting is what they describe as a strong computer skill. So they had people perform tasks. And an example of a strong computer user is somebody who can receive emails from 3 different people suggesting what time would be best for them for a meeting. A strong computer user can look through those 3 emails and see what the best time is, and then send a calendar invite to those 3 people at the optimum time. So that doesn't sound very complicated, does it? I imagine all of you on this call are capable of doing that. But that was a strong computer user task because it involves holding several different pieces of information in your mind, sorting through your inbox, and sending a calendar invite at the appropriate time. Only 7% of people can do that. And yet we give them these complicated interfaces like this. One thing that Brian will probably mention that they have at Habanero Consulting, a product they call Go, the Go Intranet Accelerator. And it's a SharePoint in a box platform that takes the default SharePoint experience and turns it into an easy to use interface, because the average person can't use this. But if you're finding that employees are having trouble using your HR systems, that's a reason to consider chatbots, because everybody understands conversational UI, right? It's just human-like text or human speech talking. You see, you say something, the computer says something. You say something, the computer says something. You scroll up for the history. You've got a log there. It makes sense. Everybody understands it. That's why messaging is the #1 use of mobile phones. So let's just talk now about a few scenarios where a chatbot isn't a good fit. So the first scenario we'll look at is when employees aren't sure what they need. You see, if they need to browse some sort of list, chatbots aren't for browsing. You can't look at your available options. So if it's a scenario where employees need to see it first, or when they think, I'll know it when I see it, a chatbot doesn't help in that scenario, does it? That's why in the back end of chatbots, this is the back end of Tangowork, and you can see it's a big interface here where we manage the content and the different messages, and we can search through them and organize and tag. Behind the scenes in the chatbot is this huge body of knowledge, and you need a way to go through it because you can't browse it just through that text interface. Another scenario where a chatbot probably isn't a fit is if you need to deliver long-form content. Consider your dress policy. Right? This is one I downloaded off the internet from Southern Health NHS. Right? It was 15 pages, the dress policy. You're not going to be able to deliver this over a chatbot. But then again, you might want to consider, do you really need a 13-page dress policy? The CEO of General Motors was in the news a few months ago because she got rid of their Byzantine dress code and just replaced it with 2 words. Here's our new dress code: dress appropriately. You can deliver that in a chatbot. Here's an example of the CNN chatbot compared to the CNN mobile experience. And notice how short the chatbot content is? It's basically 3 sentences, which gives you what you absolutely need to know about the story. You can see on the right, though, when it's optimized for mobile, it's much longer. So if you have long content, chatbot's probably not perfect. Of course, within your chatbots, you can sometimes embed a web browser too. So when you click something, it either triggers a mini browser inside your chatbot or takes you to a full browser experience. But obviously, the bigger the screen real estate you have, the easier it is to read. So if you got a lot of words that you got to communicate with something, a chatbot may not be the right fit. Third scenario is if you need to show what's happening. Like if you want people to serendipitously discover content, again, you can't do that in a chatbot. A chatbot has to respond to some sort of user input. See, here's an intranet. This is just a sample of Workplace by Facebook. And you can see here there's a lot of random stuff going on, and you can randomly discover content. There's no serendipity happening on a chatbot. So a chatbot's not a replacement for, say, Yammer or Workplace by Facebook or any other kind of Twitter type interface, right? Can't replace that. A fourth scenario where you're not going to want a chatbot is when you need a full graphical user interface. So, for example, browsing an org chart isn't going to work really on a chatbot. You can ask, who is so-and-so's boss? And it'll give you a great answer, instant answer. But if you want to browse an org chart, you can't really do that in a chatbot. Or if you want to work with documents, or if you want to edit photos, obviously you're not going to do that in a chatbot. So here's an example from my last company, Thought Farmer. That's their org chart UI. There's no way to really represent that in a chatbot. However, it's not really an either-or situation. Web app or chatbot, they really can complement each other. Many companies are taking a SharePoint site and embedding a chatbot on it. And I think that's what Brian is going to show us. And Bupa, they have their chatbot available both in Skype for Business and on an internal SharePoint site. Here's an example of an intranet running inside Slack. So notice you've got Slack, we're talking to the Citadel intranet, and we ask it here, how do I get an account to Dropbox? And the chatbot gives an instant answer. It's managed by IT, send them an email. Now we type, what is the address for the London office? And again, the chatbot gives an instant answer to that. Now, we ask about a news item, Hanjin investment, this new investment. What it does is it goes and hits the intranet and provides a link to the intranet. Or we type Melissa, and it comes back with 2 employee profiles. We click one of those, and it actually goes to the intranet, in this case powered by Igloo, and shows the result. Then we type dress code. Again, it's searching the intranet and coming up with the result. We say, what does EBITDA mean? And the chatbot says earnings before income tax, depreciation, and amortization. So in that last case, the chatbot has an instant answer. So that's one thing we see being done in chatbots. It may have an instant answer to certain things. If it doesn't have an answer, it falls back to executing an intranet search and provides those results back. So that's kind of the best of both worlds. You still have an intranet or an HR system, but you make it available within messaging channels. Now, Brian, I am really excited to meet Pepper. This is a Habaneros chatbot. Can you share your screen with us and show us what you guys are doing with chatbots?
You bet. Let me just pull you into my life here.
Perfect. I see it.
Yeah, you're good. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess one of the questions I noticed popped up in one of your channels is, if you have multiple chatbots, how do you help users navigate to the right one? And I think just to say it right out of the gate, giving your chatbot an identity. In our case, we call our chatbot Pepper. helps to kind of distinguish, well, what is Pepper good for? What can I ask of Pepper, and having different identities if you do have different chatbots, I suppose is one of those ways of making it start to make sense for your end users. So yeah, Pepper was, when people come to us, we often, we're well known for building intranets and have the product that you mentioned, Go Intranet Accelerator. And when people
Is that what I'm looking at here? Is this Go?
It is, yeah, you're looking at Go. It's an intranet built on Office 365. What we find is one of the common new questions we're getting is, well, why don't I just have a chatbot for my intranet? And, for all the reasons you mentioned, I think a chatbot can help complement the intranet, and this is what we've tried to do with Pepper here, and looking at and harvesting those scenarios which we think are unique to being successful in a chatbot. I think you still, of course, need that rich intranet experience for things like news and policies and procedures and all the long pieces of content that don't work well on a chatbot that you mentioned. So down here we have our little Pepper. I'm just gonna say hi to Pepper. So I'm actually logged in right now as myself. Pepper knows who I am, and let's go to something simple to start. You showed this in your demo, but we'll just go in with what is our guest Wi-Fi to start. And so this is where Pepper's kind of finding information that it thinks is the right answer, and then asking me to help improve its results by giving some feedback as to whether or not it gave me the right answer. So in this case, we're just actually harvesting a question and answer list that over time just becomes better and better for some common questions. To look at something that's integrating with a backend system, we can find you have to excuse my typing on the fly here. We can find a contact. We'll start with someone that actually works at my company. So the chatbot's first exploration was through our Active Directory and found Chris in Active Directory. What's more compelling, though, is when we look for someone who doesn't work for Habanero. And so we'll find our contact, Dave Carley. So in this case, it can't find it in Active Directory, so it's going out to Microsoft CRM and looking at where this contact might be in CRM. And in this case, it's found Dave Carley as an employee who works for Microsoft and sent me his contact information. So I should note, like you mentioned, there's Pepper's accessible through our intranet product, but it's also accessible through those other channels like text and other chat experiences like Skype. So it's very funny. I was walking in because our webinar started nice and early this morning. I was walking in and needed the door code because I don't come in early enough to be the first here very often. So I actually went to our chatbot and asked what the door code is, which I won't do right now. It'll actually tell you. Just to make sure when I opened that door, the alarm wasn't going to go off. So
nice.
Definitely worked. And then when we talk about those HR experiences, of course, users don't know when they're accessing an HR system or when they're asking a question that has to do with IT. I think some of that's often obscured from end users around, who does what in the organization. One that often is information about benefits, though. So what is my technology? So here at Habanero, we have a technology and wellness allowance. And so we're going out to our enterprise system to look at what my specific technology allowance and wellness allowance balances are. It looks like I'm a little overspent in my wellness allowance there.
Looks like it.
And then we've also integrated some things like I'm going to give you a fun one here. So I'm feeling sick. One other common scenario for lots of organizations is that logging a sick day and letting people know that you're sick. So we have, I'm feeling sick. Would you like me to log a sick day? So if I say yes to this, it goes out to our enterprise time system and puts an entire sick day in for today. And then it asks me whether or not I want to turn automatic replies on for Outlook. If I say yes to that, and I quickly jump over into my out of office and Outlook, we see that it's set the automatic replies as of right now.
Oh, that's awesome.
Turn that off because Letting people know.
And so do you have a lot of sick days booked this year from doing
I do, yeah. It's funny, I have to keep remembering to go back. We have, I'll show you in just one moment, because I as a partner at Habanero, I don't have vacation days, which maybe is sort of human. but I over here, I have another chatbot that's this one's same pepper. In this case, though, we're logged in as a colleague, Jan, and I can find out how many vacation days he has. It's because there's my vacation balance. Again, going out to that enterprise system to get that information. And I suppose the last kind of fun thing I'll just point out is I'm running late. We've got a lot of integration in what we think are scenarios where you're using Office 365. Obviously, the product we have is built on Office 365 and is an intranet. So if you're running late, the chatbot looks forward in your calendar and lets them know. So for me, I have a meetup I'm supposed to be in right now. Lets them know that I'm running late for a meeting. It looks forward to the next 2 hours of my schedule, and then lets anyone in the 2-hour window know that that I'm running late. So it's kind of a fun, clever thing.
Wow, neat. No, that's a great demonstration of some of the different things you can do with a chatbot that helps improve the employee experience. I like the way you branded it too. It's nice that it's got a name, Pepper, that's related to, obviously, Habanero,
Yeah.
your company.
Yeah, there's a little pun there.
Yeah, no, that's. I mean, sometimes we can get carried away with branding of chatbots, because the bottom line is, does it help people get their work done or not? But still, I think everybody enjoys having a bit of an identity and personality around their chatbot.
Yeah, I definitely would say for our team here, it's the little funny things that do stand out and make a difference. So having a bit of that personality show up is important, just like it is for my Alexa device at home. She's quite the attitude sometimes.
Right. So for those of you who don't know Habanero, I think Habanero is the winningest firm in the Nielsen Norman intranet design annual competition. So every year Nielsen Norman says it reports on the 10 best intranets in the world, and it's always kind of a who's who of companies. And how many times have you guys helped somebody win a Nielsen Norman award, Brian?
We have 5 wins under our belt. So I think we are probably the winningest. It's pretty lucky to just get one. And it's been, obviously we don't do those intranets to win awards. We do those intranets to create great impact in organizations, and awards are a bit of a bonus. But yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Right. Who are those companies that have won awards? I remember Goldcorp won one, wasn't it?
Yeah, Goldcorp was one. A company called Bennett Jones. We helped WorkSafe BC win an award in British Columbia. I'm on the spot and I can't think of the others right now.
Yeah,
Enbridge was one.
Oh, Enbridge, a big pipe company. WestJet, I know WestJet's one of your clients. Have they ever won?
No, WestJet hasn't won an award. We haven't applied for an award though. So.
Nice. So one of the questions we have here is how are clients able to measure or prove an improved return on investment, and what kind of elements did their return on investment cover? Yeah, that's a great question. Some people are doing these projects as part of an innovation incubator. It's becoming more common in large organizations to have some sort of incubation budget. So it goes under an experimental category, but I don't think that's what you're really asking, is it? You're looking for a real ROI. A client we worked with recently, I talked about that scenario where deploying a piece of software has actually increased your headcount in your operations center. And so in that case, the business case for the client was all about, we've had to hire 10 more people because we deployed this piece of software. By deploying a chatbot, we hope to reduce that by 1 person or 2 persons or 3 persons. So actually seeing a decrease in the headcount in your support center. That's not going to be a justifiable ROI for a small company, because obviously there's nothing you could deploy that's going to cause you to have to hire 10 more people. But if you have tens of thousands of people, then you have a significant people operations center budget, and deploying a chatbot can have an impact on that. So that's one way to approach the ROI from that help angle and reducing the number of people that need to help with the software. Brian, if you have any other ideas on ROI, please feel free to jump in.
I just want to, I'll live a little bit dangerously on this one and say, especially when you're talking about HR chatbots, I think the friction that employees experience in their organization is just defeating. And it's the friction around finding information around benefits, the friction around finding the content they need to get their jobs done. And so that ultimately leads to deteriorated experience and engagement with an employee. And so living dangerously, I'd say it's maybe common sense that when you're making these experiences easier for employees, you're improving their engagement within the organization. And there's lots of ways you can measure that. We have a very strong correlation of our employees' digital experiences and what their engagement is with Habanero. We understand the drivers around that quite well based on how we survey our employees. And I'd say, ultimately, this is about improving the ability for employees to be successful in their organizations. That's the bottom line on that is infinite if you're measuring it right.
Yeah, I would say you need a visionary leader to deploy a chatbot with that as your kind of your ROI, right?
But you know what? These are trailblazers usually often in the organization.
That's true. It's true. So quite often, somebody like a CFO, if that's the person approving it, they will need more hard numbers. Just by if we go with the stereotypical CFO, right? He or she will want an ROI with a specific dollar number, and so if you can reduce headcount somehow, then that will probably satisfy those needs. If you can't, you probably need a visionary leader to approve the chatbot who's just going to do it more based on a sixth sense and say, hey, this is going to improve engagement, like Brian said, right? So feel free to type in more questions about if you have any more questions for Brian's chatbot or for me. But next we're going to talk about some of the things we've learned, best practices for deploying an HR chatbot. So the first is to start with a narrow domain. Unless you have a massive budget, you don't want to try to build Siri or Alexa or Google Home. Here's an early example from Siri that I always find comical. What can I help you with? Siri, I'm bleeding really bad. Can you call me an ambulance? From now on, I'll call you an ambulance, okay? Right? So you got hundreds of engineers working on this, but that's obviously not what the person wants to do. This now works properly, by the way, on iOS devices. If you say that, Siri will make an emergency call. But it illustrates the point that even with a huge team, Alexa, Siri, Google Home, they don't work perfectly. In fact, they probably get it wrong more than they get it right. The way you address that is by starting with a small scope. Obviously, you don't have a bunch of engineers at your company. You'll probably be a pretty compact project team for deploying a chatbot. So here's some ideas. It might just be a news bot, right, where you concentrate more on sending broadcasts or updates. Maybe it's a help bot, like we talked about, to assist employees with a particular piece of software, answering questions like, how do I book time off? Or what's the link to the time off system? Or that kind of thing. It could be a contacts bot where it's all about looking up contact information. Brian illustrated that working both with internal and external contacts, pulling from both Active Directory or from the CRM. Or it could be a subject matter expert. The bot I showed you at Bupa, what prompted the building of a bot was a move to a new office. So they had a new headquarters building in London, and in the months approaching the move, employees had so many questions about why are we moving, when are we moving, what's the nearest tube station, the nearest train station, is there a gym nearby, are there restaurants nearby? So we built a bot for them that was all about the move. So a focused context there, or a focused subject matter. And that's what it answered questions about. So a second best practice is to have one killer feature. What's the one thing your chatbot will do to keep employees coming back again and again? Brian mentioned the door code for the front entrance. If you know that you can instantly get the door code for your front door, if you're a smaller company or regional office, and you can do that via SMS even without your data, maybe that's a killer use case. At Bupa, it was, what's the guest Wi-Fi password? They used to have it plastered on posters around the office, and they had to update it every couple of weeks, which is a big pain. Now people ask the chatbot for it. So you need to ask yourself, what's your killer feature? What's the one thing this chatbot's going to do that will keep people coming back again and again? A third best practice is to design failure carefully. Unlike a website, you can't click every single button, right, and say, oh, good, it's working right. Or an application, try everything. Because you can't possibly come up with all the different things that people might say to a chatbot. So when it fails, you want to steer the user back towards supported tasks. So here the person is mad at the chatbot, they say, stupid bot, and the chatbot says, I don't understand, please try again, and the person gets really mad, right? That doesn't help. But you might do something like this. Looks like you might appreciate some help dealing with me. Pick from this list how to use me, what I know, where to access me, who can access me, who maintains me. And that calms the person down, right, and brings them back into the fold. We find it helpful to think about the confusion matrix when we're considering the different responses that a bot can make. To illustrate what this means, imagine if a person asks for the Wi-Fi password. A true positive is the correct answer. It's 123 password. A false positive is if the chatbot completely misunderstands and says, we have 3,000 employees. Unless that's the strangest Wi-Fi password ever, that is a false positive. A false negative is if the chatbot says, sorry, I don't know, but it actually does know. So those two false situations, those are resolved by tuning the natural language processing engine, the AI engine. But a true negative is when the chatbot really doesn't know, you haven't designed it to know, and it says, sorry, I don't know. So that's the correct response. But if you think about those true negatives, those correct rejections, you have an opportunity there to steer the user or to give them additional information to help them ask questions that are in the domain of knowledge of the chatbot. A fourth practice is to grow your pilot gradually. It's impossible to anticipate what users will say, as I mentioned. So we favor using a chart like this, right? The white line is the percentage of incorrect responses that the chatbot gives. So when you first start, 100% of your chatbot responses are going to be incorrect because the chatbot doesn't have any data yet. And the orange line is the number of chatbot users you have. So you increase the number of chatbot users very gradually as that white line plummets, as the chatbot understands more and more. And you're gradually reading through the transcripts. You start ideally with friendly users, right? People who will cut the chatbot a little bit of slack. And once it's down to like 5-10% incorrect responses, then you can launch. And then your chatbot users goes way up and you continue to refine it. I'll show you the kind of conversation you might have with an early chatbot user. This is a chatbot we built for a conference that happens each year in London, the Intranet Now conference. In fact, if you want to see that chatbot, you can on Facebook Messenger. Just type Intranet Now and you'll come to the conference and you can ask some questions. For the 2018 conference, they're still refining it, but in about a week or two, it'll be working perfectly, but it already answers many of your questions. You can see that Catherine here says hello. The chatbot says, hi, this is the Intranet Now conference bot. See the menu below for options. And Catherine asks, what menu? Oh, we hadn't anticipated that question. Instead, it misunderstands, gives her what we call a false positive, and gives her the schedule for the conference. Then she says, what is the closest train station? We hadn't anticipated that either, but we should have. We gave her the answer here for the tube station, but it didn't know what the train station was, so it didn't have any way to handle that. Then she asks, what should I wear? Again, that's a good question for a conference, but we hadn't anticipated it. And then she says, how far is the walk from London Bridge Station? And we said, we expect over 220 attendees. That's what an early chatbot conversation looks like, complete disaster, right? But we're monitoring these transcripts, and shortly afterwards, it could nail the answer to all those questions. So now, if somebody says, what menu? It explains, use the messenger menu to navigate at the bottom, near where you type, or try these commands. Now, somebody asks, what is the closest train station? It gives the correct answer. What should I wear? Gives the correct answer, even gives a photo of last year's conference so you can kind of judge for yourself. So related to that, our fifth best practice is to review your transcripts constantly. Most of your time is spent on exceptions, things you didn't think about, and trying to improve that. In Tangowork, we have nice features for reviewing transcripts. We click transcripts, and we can see, here's the conversation that I just had with the chatbot early on. Hi, does Tangowork work on SMS? And you can see there underneath what the person says. It gives the confidence level. You can directly edit the message if you want to improve it. We have a lot of tools in the chatbot for reviewing transcripts and making that process easy. Unrecognized utterances is all the things the person said that the chatbot wasn't sufficiently confident on. So like big melon, that should be a none utterance. That doesn't make any sense. The chatbot's not going to answer that. So we just tell the chatbot specifically, hey, we're not going to try to give an answer to big melon. Verified utterances is when the person got one of those prompts that you saw in Brian's bot, where it goes back to the user and says, hey, I'm only 57% confident in my answer. Was I correct? And then the person can flag it yes or no. In Tangowork, we have a confidence threshold that we measure for everything the user says. And if it's between 40 and 60%, then we ask the user for confirmation. If the confidence is above 60%, it's usually the right response, so we don't confirm with the user. If it's below 40%, then rather than risk giving the wrong answer, a false positive, we say, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that question. So the last thing we're going to do in this webinar is talk about a high-level project plan. And again, if you have any questions, just type them into the Q&A panel, and we'll get to them in about 3 minutes. So high-level project plan, this is what a chatbot project looks like if we're deploying, in this example, if it's a plan for helping with if it's a help bot for assisting with a piece of software. So you do some ordinary project management things here. Define your team, create some sort of collaboration hub for the team members to collaborate. Of course, you have your weekly status meetings. Then we would review the existing content that you already have and look through your trouble tickets. What sort of trouble are people reporting? And so where's the opportunity for the chatbot to intercept on those and prevent it from getting all the way to a person? So from there, we would identify what are the primary usage scenarios for this chatbot. Early on, we like to establish some meaningful metrics. You see in the last column is the week number that this would take. So you can see we're progressing through weeks in the project. And again, this is just an estimate. And then we would design sample conversation flows for each of those primary user scenarios. So depending on the usage scenarios that we come up with, it may include simple Q&A, some button-based flows where it gives the user a few options to pick from. It could include delivering a video or even delivering a little micro course, like a 1 or 2 minute course that it takes the user through a few steps and educates them how to do something. Then we would assemble and apply the branding and then develop custom functionality. Quite often in these projects, there's some sort of custom integration or something new that the chatbot hasn't done before that we'll have to customize for. Then we'll assemble and edit all that content, including the pleasantries. Those are responses to things like, how are you today, or goodbye, or thanks, and failures. how we're going to handle it when there's a true negative that the bot has to provide. Then we would generate possible user questions, things that the user might say, and after that we go to pilot. So we plan the pilot, we train the administrators on the system. Sorry, I said that a little too soon. We would configure the chatbot content, we train the AI engine, and then we go in a little loop, testing and revising for a few weeks. And so that's with the core project team, trying out all sorts of things, saying what you think the chatbot should be able to respond to, and working on that, improving on it. We conduct a pre-pilot review, and then for 3 or 4 weeks, we're running a gradually expanding pilot. We're studying the transcripts, seeing what real people are asking, making sure we can handle that. And then by week 12, we're launching, and then after launch, you have an ongoing project reviewing transcripts and revising. So I hope that's helpful to show you what a high-level project plan can look like for a chatbot. So there I am, quote that I just made up. If it can be expressed in words, you will be doing it with a chatbot. Consumers are using chatbots and voice bots heavily now, and the technology to power them in the enterprise is ready now and is getting better every month. So if we're doing a task that can be expressed in words, we will use a chatbot to do it. Maybe not today in our organization, but soon in every organization. So get started with chatbots, run some experiments, run some pilot programs. They'll be a major factor in all of our digital workplaces in the near future. Now, Tangowork and Habanero, we're available to help you with your chatbot projects. So Tangowork and Habanero partner from time to time when it makes sense. Habanero has deep expertise with Microsoft technologies and complicated systems integrations. And we at Tangowork have a ready-to-go, out-of-the-box chatbot platform. So we can help you with that, but we also realize that a lot of people need help with the early planning stages, developing user scenarios and doing needs analysis. And we can help you with that early stage, even getting to the point of a business case and having a proof of concept bot or some sort of demonstration bot. And then we can help you both with our out-of-the-box software, which kind of gives you a jump start on your chatbot project. But we can also do custom chatbot software. And what we usually do is start with our software as a nucleus, right, and build customizations based on that. So if you'd like help with your chatbot project, we'd love to help you, both myself and Brian.
Yeah, hello. Thanks, Chris, for the promotion there.
Yeah, you bet. So questions. Brian, do you have any questions? So we have a question.
Absolutely. I just gonna give you a thumbs up on your approach there, because I think maybe even more just again to that ROI conversation, like this is a really great platform for piloting, and I think you can keep the investment relatively low to understand what the impact could be in the organization, and that's kind of the point of pilots, so that you're exploring areas where you might see ROI, and this is one way to try and understand that. Right.
Another question is how long does a chatbot project take? And again, how long it takes and how much it costs are related. But it can be 4 weeks if we're just talking about quick prototypes, right? With some basic conversations. And they could also be, say, 12 to 16 weeks. I mean, 12 to 16 weeks is often what we think as a starting point. The project plan I just showed you, I think, was about 12 weeks. So that might be a number to go off. Any other questions that we can answer for people? Just type them into the question panel. Well then, I think we'll leave it there. If there's nothing else, we encourage you to go to tangowork.com, and you can look at our blog there. Also, habaneroconsulting.com, and you can find their website. If I just bring it up here, There's the Tangowork website, tangowork.com. And go to our blog for some interesting articles, also some case studies on real chatbots. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks, Brian, so much for joining us to demo Pepper to us. That was really interesting.
You bet. Thanks for being a leader around chatbots in the world.
Thanks, Brian. And this webinar will be recorded, and we'll send a link to you out afterwards if you'd like to show it to colleagues. So see everybody online, and thanks for joining us today.